Easy. All right. The only illumination was from the windows of Queen's great hall. The squares of gold evenly spaced about its walls made it look like a giant jewel-set crown in the night. And with the light and the sounds of music and of voices came also from the hall where the feasters sat late over their drinking and telling of tales. Okay, just for a second, I'm going to test my new tuning, baby. Yeah. BobCat just does what he wants. Yes, I do. But hopefully, nice. Okay. These lands are blessed by my people, I know. The very ground for which you stand. Grandmother knows well. Grandmother knows well. Say. Start again. Chapter 5, Promises. The only illumination was from the windows of Queen's great hall. The squares of gold evenly spaced about its walls made it look a giant jewel-set crown in the night. And with the light, the sounds of music and of voices came also from the hall, where the feasters sat late over their drinking and telling of tales. The rest of the fortress yard was dark and quiet and nearly empty, but not quite. There was one pair of figures strolling along the parapet walk that circled the yard high on the inside of the palisade. From here, the view of the countryside was impressive, spreading away in all directions about the hill. A sweet, soft darkness lay upon the nighttime countryside. The air was fresh, not chill, and scented, with the invigorating tang of spring's new growth. A full moon silvered the clouds that sailed beneath it, and made the meadows seem a billowing cloak of deep green wool. It also shone upon the young man's faces of the couple on the parapet, Finn and Saul. The sounds of the hall drifted to the strolling pair, but they seemed oblivious to them, detached somehow, as if they had a little world of their own together there. Sob was listening raptly again as Finn spoke, her gaze shifting to follow his pointing arm as he proudly told her of the construction of his fortress. And that throw of marble was created by our master sculptor for us, he said, indicating the white basin was just within the gates. At the end of each day, it's the custom of the Fian warrior to first have his bath and to see his grooming. Okay, so why would you have to stay clean? Well, in battle, that avoids infection, right? Anyway, the Fian warrior to first have his bath and to see his grooming. So the tro may be the best used thing within Almhuin. Okay. Or the trough. He paused and then added with a grin, after our weapons and our ale tankards, of course. Right. It's most fascinating, she said. But the last word was mingled with a small yawn. He looked at her with sudden concern. I'm sorry, he told her contritely. You've had a wearing day and so many shocks, and here I am keeping you up through half the night with my bragging, like a child showing off his newest toys. No, she protested quickly. I've been most interested, really, and it is amazing that one so young as yourself has built up all of this. Well, just a bit of help with it, he said, smiling again. And the idea for building it came from my clansmen. You'll soon find that modesty not a trait of anyone in my family. The old stronghold of my father was long abandoned and decayed. They felt a captain of the Fianna needed a grander place, and one that would remind all that the Clan Barcine was once more the most powerful in all Ireland. Once more, she repeated. What do you mean? It's a very long tale, he told her. Someday, when you're wanting another chance at being bored, I'll tell it to you. Oh, I'm certain that nothing you could bore me with, she said with great enthusiasm, looking up at him and then suddenly abashed, turning away to look out across the countryside. And these lands, she asked, swiftly changing subjects, are they yours as well? All Ireland is ours. Wow, he said in a grand way, moving up beside her and sweeping a hand round at the horizon. The Fianna are not bound to duns and twalts and provinces, as are the other folk. We're free. We rove where we will and fight where we must in the cold half of the year. We find quarters in our own homes or the homes of those we serve. But in the warm half, then the wild woods and the rough mountains and the wide plains of Ireland are our home. There is our real home. Then is our real living time. You say you are free, she said, looking to him with a small frown of puzzlement. Yet you tell me that you serve the people of Ireland, that you're bound to them by oaths of loyalty and by payments you made to you. Loyal, yes, he said. But that's by our own choice now. Not as tribute forced from us by Ireland's lords. The way it was with our fathers, there is no power in Ireland that can make the Fianna do what they've no wish to do. Not even the High King. Ooh. And you, Finn MacCumhor, she said, regarding him with curiosity. Who are you? I don't know what you mean, he said. Smiling disarmingly, I'm nothing more than a fighting man of the Fians like my comrades. No, you are more, she said, with certainty. To lead such a wondrous company, to have so grand a fortress, to face Firdorsh as you did, those things make you something more. She leaned towards him, her eyes searching his. Her face grew serious, and her tone turned gravely earnest as she asked, And are you happy? Happy? He echoed. The unexpected question seemed to nonplus him. He drew back a little, looking at her with surprise. Why? He began, then halted as if suddenly aware that an answer did not come so readily. He considered a moment, then began again. Of course, he said, with enormous certainty. And why wouldn't I be? There's no grander life. I have my comrades, my adventuring, my hunts. They're what I was meant for. They're what my whole life has been. And yet, she said slowly, thoughtfully, continuing to probe the depths of his eyes with her own. I see something in you. I hear it in your voice. I feel it. Some yearning, maybe. Some regret. He clearly didn't know how to respond to this, only looking puzzled and uncomfortable. Finally, she shook her head, as if irritated by herself. I'm sorry, she told him. I've no right to be prying into your feelings. I'm only grateful for the help you've given me and regret the danger you've taken upon yourself. Danger? Said Finn. But I've told you, there's no danger. There is, she insisted. The dark Druid won't rest until he takes me and has revenge on you. You don't know how powerful he is. He can still be destroyed. Finn assured her most boldly, striking a gallant pose. And if you tell me where he is, I promise you, I'll go to him and either force him to release you or see his treacherous life ended. I wish it could be, she said, truthfully. But I've no idea where he is. His home is far away and well hidden. That's all I know. I went and left there in the fawn's shape. Even what memory I have is clouded by that transformation. She paused and considered, then went on, more philosophically. But perhaps that's the best. For even if I were to know, I couldn't have you risking yourself for more. He would be far too deadly on his own ground, far too deadly. Nothing is too great a risk to see you free, Finn said, fervently, taking her small hand and enveloping it tightly in his own. I am content enough with my new fate, she replied, with a matching ardor of her own, lifting her other hand to clasp his. To be here with you as a woman once again is great freedom to me after my years as a fawn. Then, my lady, there's no greater pleasure I can think of than to have you here, he said. And I promise you that I'll make your life as happy a one as it can be. I'm going to breathe. Have a drink of coffee. In their absorption with each other, neither took note of the figure standing silhouetted in the light streaming from the hall's doorway. The golden light glowed behind the profile of Cowlight McRonan and struck a hard gleam from his eyes as he stared up toward the pair upon the wall. Sword swept against the sword. Okay, hold on. Sword swept against sword, clanging as blades met. Finn stepped back as Cowlight drove in, parrying a savage cut, striking back with his round shield in a blow that knocked the Dark Warrior sideways a step. In the warmth of the open, sunny yards, the two were stripped to only their simple tunics, which clung to their sweat-soaked, straining bodies as they battled back and forth across the hard-packed earth. Both men were truly laboring. Their fight, though practice, was of little less intensity than the real thing. Their moves were broad, powerful, and swift. Their tactics were shrewd, loose, and brutal. Both combatants using legs, knees, shoulders, and whole bodies as weapons along with swords and shields. They were in constant motion, whirling about one another, lunging in, often swinging about, locked in close embrace, their battle appearing a grotesque parody of a dance. Their grace, energy, and skill had even afforded them an audience. A few other warriors who had quit their own exercises to watch. The two wolfhounds, a few idle servants, and some admiring women of the fortress. And nearby, two small boys copied the fighters with wooden staffs at play that also had a practical, if grim, purpose to it. Finally, both men drove in together, weapons locked against each other's shields, arms thrown wide, grunting with the strain, their taut and streaming faces pressed close together. For a long, tensed moment, they were frozen this way. Then Cowlight lowered his head and shot straight forward, putting Finn hard in the breastbone. The fair-haired man gave an oof of pain and staggered back. Ugh. Bent forward, barely maintaining his feet. Ugh. He lowered his weapons and looked at his companion in surprise. "We're being a bit rougher than usual today, aren't we?" he asked. "With no enemies to hone our skills upon since the summer's past, we've both gotten a very dull," Cowlight tersely replied, "especially you." That was in capitals. The last word was a shout, and he attacked again upon it, clearly seeking to take the young captain off his guard. He did manage to drive his opponent back with a swift series of blows. But Finn soon recovered, and they fell to it too evenly once more. But this time, Finn wheeled right, feinting, as if to come at his comrade's side, then darted back in and up under Cowlight's guard, fetching him a blow and under the chin with his shield boss, that snapped the dark man's head back. Now it was his turn to retreat, recover, and stare in surprise. Dull I am, Finn told him with a grin. Do that one more time. Dull I am. Then he tossed down the battered practice sword and shield. "Enough now. There's a great thirst on me." He went to the stone basin and leaned over after drinking from his cupped hands. He stuck his head right in the cool water, swooshing it up over his head and neck, then rising to let it run down over the sweating body. This guy really goes into depth. Okay. As he rose up, his gaze lit on a figure upon the parapet. It was Saab, standing alone where he and she had stood before, looking out over the countryside. Okay, that's where I'm going to pause for a second and have a drink. Hell. Okay. He continued to gaze thoughtfully upon her. Oh, wait. He continued to gaze thoughtfully up at her, while Cowlight moved in beside him to wash his own face. The coffee's kicking in. Okay, hold on. Okay. She's up there again. Finn. Okay, I got to compose. She's up there again. There we go. Finn commented to his friend, "Is she?" The other replied without interest, splashing more water down his tunic front and then standing up. "She's been on the parapet walk every day, just staring out," Finn added in a pitying tone. "Let's get back to it," said Cowlight, brusquely taking up his weapons again. Finn made no move for his own. "There's little enough in this done to cheer her," he went on. "She's not complained, but I know she's pinning for her freedom." Cowlight picked up Finn's sword and stepped close, his voice stern and almost lecturing. "Now you listen to me, Finn. You can't do anything else for her. You freed her from the spell and given her a place here. You owe her nothing more." He thrust the weapon into his friend's hand. "Now come on. Let's just have another good fight." "You're wrong, Cowlight," Finn replied, turning his gaze to the Dark Warrior. "I've promised to make her as happy here as I could, and that I will do." Cowlight looked at the determination in his comrade's face. He gave a weary sort of sigh and shook his head. "And what was that for?" Finn demanded. "It's nothing," Cowlight said. "Nothing at all." "It was something, all right," Finn insisted. "I know that sounds well enough." "I suppose you do," the other agreed. "And then you also know what it means." Another smiling face, beguiling gaze. "It's not like that at all," Finn said in protest. "It's that she's so frail, so helpless, so beautiful," Cowlight finished. "Forlorn, I meant to say," Finn corrected in a testy way. "And if I can't give her the whole world again, at least I can give her a bit of it beyond these walls." He tossed down the sword. "I'll take her outside myself," he said decisively. He started toward her, but paused, looking down at the old stained tunic that he wore. "First, though," he added, "I think I'll change." He turned about and headed for the hall. Cowlight watched him go. His expression one of frustration, but then an anger took him. "The Morrigan curse it!" He spat out savagely and heaved his own sword far across the yard. Whatever. The stick spun in the air as it arched high and then fell back, thumping softly into the thick grass. Braun and Skillan were upon it together, rolling over one another in the eagerness to be the one to possess it. After some scuffling, snapping, and growling, Bron got the stick firmly clenched in his massive jaws, those were the dogs, and went tearing away upon the hillside, Skilone close behind. Those are Irish wolfhounds. Those are giant, shaggy, white dogs. Huge. Knock horses over and shit. Okay. Above them, halfway up the slope to the fortress walls, sat Finn and Sob. She was applauding and laughing delightedly as the hounds bounded to her. Bron dropped the stick before her like some prize of gold and then offered his broad head for her to pet. Then Skilone arrived, crowding in beside his brother and whining for like treatment. "It's like puppies you two are," she said, with vast amusement, stroking the heads of both. Their tails wagged furiously in their ecstasy. "Easy, lads," Finn cautioned, grinning. "You'll be knocking her down, pressing in at her that way." The pair quickly backed away, and Finn stood up. He was now wearing a clean white tunic and his green wool cloak. At his side hung a long sword in a sheath of bronze etched with figures of beasts and warriors. He picked up a plain oval shield of gray metal and fitted it on his left arm, then offered his right hand to her. "Shall we walk?" he said. Wow. "The brook below us is a most lovely place, especially in the spring." She put out her hand and She put out her hand and he drew her lightly to her feet. He pulled up a long, broad-bladed casting spear he had grounded beside him, and they started down the slope. The two dogs frisked along with the most unseemly abandon at her either hand. Okay. "Oh, it's good to be out here," she said as they swished. "Though the meadow's lush, knee-high grass, it's like coming into light from a darkened room. And I'm certain the day's that much the brighter for your coming into it," he said. "Get away with you," she said in embarrassment. "It's a teller of very pretty lies you are, Finn MacCoomhall. Ask any man in Ireland and he will say that Finn MacCoomhall has never told a lie," he protested. "It's a thing I'm most proud of, and I don't lie. Now in what I say. The lads know it." He pointed at the hounds. "Look at them. With you, they forget all their dignity. That's as it may be." She responded laughingly, watching them cavort. Then her expression grew more thoughtful. "They are rather strange hounds," she went on. "They seem quite human in many ways." "That they are," said Finn. "It's why the servant of the Dark Druid who sent you here told you they wouldn't harm you. You see, they were born of a woman." Wow. "My own aunt, it was, who had been transformed by a spell, as you were, but into a hound." "Transformed," she said, looking at the pair with new interest. "Why?" "It was for reasons much like your own, love and revenge. The lads were born when she had the hounds form upon her. She was restored, but they remained this way. Still, they have very human wits, and they sense you in spirit, kindred to theirs." "Poor creatures," she said in tone of deep compassion, "doomed forever to wear those shapes. And I felt myself trapped." They reached the bottom of the slope. Here flowed a small but exuberant brook, its banks lined with trees whose luxuriant foliage created a cool, shadowed haven from the bright, warm day. The four entered, moving down to the water's edge. An ancient oak arched over the water at one point, its exposed roots making natural chairs at the bankside. Finn helped the girl settle herself comfortably into a cozy spot. The hounds, their mana sobering, took up positions on either side of the tree, sitting with heads up alert and watching clearly on guard. It's good that the lads still see themselves as your guardians, Finn said. You couldn't have more clever, more ferocious, or more loyal friends. He grinned and added, besides myself, of course. They're very comforting. Hold on. They're very comforting to have along outside the doom. As is that reason for your weapons too, she asked. It is, he admitted. Do they trouble you? I can make no complaint of anything that gives me chance to walk the countryside, she said. It's only they weren't a reminder that the threat of this black druid hangs on you still, he finished. Yes, I understand. Look, I'll put them away out of sight. At least for a while, you can try to forget and feel truly free. He propped the spear behind the trunk and set down his shield beside it. Oh, he's putting his weapons down. Watch out. He unstrapped his sword and put it out of sight between the two roots. Are you certain it's safe to do that? She asked. Of course, he assured her as he sat down next to her. Still, he had been careful to lay his sword so that its hilt was very convenient to his right hand for a while. Then, both just sat there quietly listening to the pleasant natural music of the flowing brook and the songs of birds. They seemed to need nothing else, not speaking but looking quite content, as if just being here together was enough. But after a time, the girl gave a little sigh and said, No, she didn't. I am enjoying myself too much. I feel quite guilty making you come here just for me. You must have so many things to do. I haven't, he quickly protested. I'm enjoying this myself. He gazed around him in a thoughtful way. It's as if I haven't really seen any of this in a very long time. Why not? She asked. I suppose I just not taken the time. Been busy. So I've heard, she said. Some of the ladies told me you spent all your days since the beginning of spring in the hunting. But they say you were a fine bard once. When I was young, maybe, he said dismissingly. But you're young now, she said. She leaned toward him, her face flushed with excitement, her voice coaxing. Please, could you do a poem for me? He hesitated, looking into the glowing, earnest face. Then, as if there were a power there could be that hold on, as if there was a power there that could not be denied. He nodded. Very well, then, he said with a smile, but I'll not guarantee the worth of it. He stood up, striking a formal pose. He began to speak, his words flowing from him, bright like the flow of the sprightly brook, rich like the grass in the summer glens, vividly colored like the spring flowers blooming on the hills. The girl listened raptly. And for that moment, they formed an idyllic picture there, on the banks of the sparkling river in the peace of the golden, dreamlike afternoon. Okay, that is the end of chapter 5. I knew that would be short, so I figured I would just roll into the next one. A little bit of romance novelty there, but you know what? At least it's true to like the old school shit that I was used to. I'm like, that's normal reality to me. I don't know. Okay. Chapter 6, Proposals. The golden scene was spread out below. The watching dog, Druid, and the seer, let's see, Malakrod. The magic bubble, that's the lady that was in there, the Vulva, or the Dark Witch, or we don't know. She's kind of a mystery. She could be neutral to a point, you know what I mean? The magic bubble that enclosed them seemed suspended close above the trees beside the brook. Oh, they're there watching them, see? Peering down through the foliage of the upper branches, like two curious crows, they spied unabashedly upon the young pair. 4 years. The expression of the Druidess was one of sardonic amusement, but the expression on Fyodor's face was one of was one of rage. Look at them there, he stormed, his fist clenching about his staff. They defy me. They humiliate me again. They flaunt my power. That arrogant mortal, how dare he? He started to climb up from his seat on the bed of cushions. I will destroy him. I must destroy him. Don't be too quick to act, she advised, placing a restraining hand upon his arm. You may be risking yourself if you confront this warrior again. What do you mean? He demanded impatiently. He has no protection outside his fortress. I can use my powers upon him. He'll be helpless. That he will not, she said. Sit down and listen to me, or you may find yourself more than humiliated the next time you meet that young man. What do you mean? He asked brusquely, dropping back beside her. Only that since you rushed blindly off on your quest to retrieve your precious fawn, I used my own powers to find out more about this Finn MacCoomhall. He is most formidable an enemy. And how so? Fear prompted irritably. Quickly, woman. Ooh. Well, she began in a deliberately slow and teasing way. He is captain of the Fianna. They are mercenary battalions made up of fiercest warriors in all Ireland. To be their leader alone speaks of great prowess for a mortal, but this Finn is more. He is of the She blood, daughter of Muireann and great-grandson to Nuada Silverhand. He has none of the She skills, but he does possess some magic of his own. Magic? The Druid said. His impatient tempered with interest now. What magic? He gained the power of legendary salmon of knowledge, so long sought by learned men, mortal and She alike. It lies within his thumb, which he burned in the cooking of the fish. His thumb? The Druid repeated, his tone skeptical. He has only to thrust it into his mouth when his life is threatened, and it will grant him the knowledge to help himself, she assured him. Ooh. And he has used it to defeat even the She before, killing Eileen, son of Needna, who came out of the Sid Finocade to burn Tara of the High Kings at Samhain time. He has some other magic help as well. He has won the weapons forged from Balor's head. Ooh. The sword named Son of the Waves and Storm Shield. He used them to destroy Darudan, the one who called himself King of the Great World. It is those same weapons he has with him now. Does he? Fear said, peering down through the fluttering screens of the leaves at Finn. In an attempt to catch a glimpse of them, his voice had taken on definite note of concern now. But no champion of the Shi in 1,000 years has been able to bring them from the country of the fair men or even survive the tests of its king. Well, this champion did. Ooh. She needled. He survived the tests, he won the weapons, and he destroyed the king. An amazing task indeed. The Druid said thoughtfully, now you begin to see what I mean by my warning. She said. And even without these powers to help him, Finn seems impossible to defeat. He is a warrior without equal who has destroyed giant and serpent and water monster with like ease. With only his wits and his daring, he has outfoxed the High King of Ireland and his own grandfather Tog, one of the most powerful sorcerers of the Shi. Finn even caused Tog to be stripped of all his powers and left a broken and isolated old man. And why was it that you knew nothing of these things before I went off to confront this Finn? Oh, I think she knew. The Dark Druid complained. We have been here too long, she explained defensively. Isolated from the rest of Ireland, separated from our own people. All this has happened within the last few years. Your young forester who helped the fawn escape joined us only a year ago. He had heard the tales of this new champion and his powers. That's how he knew she could go to Finn for help. Do you understand, Fear? To face Finn is a most dangerous thing. He has destroyed those with powers as great as yours. No one has powers as great as mine, he shot back indignantly. Even the great leaders of the Tuatha De Danann do not dare to challenge me. But no one who has challenged Finn has survived, she pointed out emphatically. You would be a fool to risk it. This seemed to have an impact on the Druid. He stared down at the two figures beside the brook for a time, brooding and silent. Yes, he said, finally. His tone one of reluctant concession. I suppose that you are right. To face him myself would seem an unnecessary risk. But there must be some way to destroy him. Some way. You would do best to let it go, she said soothingly. She lifted a hand to lightly stroke his temple. It is only for this one frail mortal girl. Forget her. There are pleasures here enough. She leaned closer, her body pressing against his, her voice caressing, her eyes inviting. I can give you happiness. You have no need, no? He said savagely, shoving her away. I want nothing from you. It's only that one I want. Even more now. No half-mortal boy will defy me. I'm not like the others he has met. I will find a way to have what I desire. He stood and leaned over her threateningly. You, woman, have only one service you can perform for me. And that you had best do well. You keep watch upon them. Watch day and night if you must, but watch their every move. Someday my chance to act will come, and I will know of it at once. He turned and stalked to the door. There he paused and turned back, raising his stick to point at the seer in a meaningful way. Make no mistake, my dear Malakrod, or you'll find yourself a rooting sow for all your endless immortal days. He went out, leaving her to glare hatefully after him. The eyes of Cowlight Macronin were glaring as they lifted to the open gateway of the fortress. No figures were visible there, and after staring a moment, he dropped his gaze and went back to his work. He was sitting on a stool beside the smithy, honing his sword with a whetstone. He worked with sharp, rhythmic, angry tones. His obvious mood of irritation reinforced by the shrill scraping sound of the stone along the blade. Again and again, he would pause to glance up at the gateway, only to take up the honing at an even more furious tempo each time. Out from the hall came the little musician called New de Royal. Glancing about the yard, his eyes fell upon Cowlight, and he strolled across to the dark warrior. He stopped beside him, watching. He stopped beside him, watching the, by this time, vehement honing of interest. Then he remarked, casually, "You're putting a bit too much of your arm into that, don't you think? And what business would that be of yours?" Cowlight answered curtly, honing on. "Only that you'll have the fine weapon down to a needle soon." Cowlight made a harsh noise of disgust and threw it down. Whatever. Both sword and stone. Then looked towards, so he threw both the sword and the stone down. Bam! Clack. Then looked toward the little man. "There," he said. "I hope that's to your liking. Now what is it you want here, bothering me?" "There's no call for such belligerence, lad," Canoe told him soothingly. "I only meant to ask if you'd seen Finn." "That I have not," snapped Cowlight, turning away in a dismissing gesture. "It's not myself seeking him," the harper persisted, "but some Twath folk are here to have Finn judge a land dispute. Some chieftains of the province want to speak of their summer allotment of calves and whelps to the Fians, and Rough Buzzing is complaining with great volume of how bare the larder has become." "Well, why ask me?" the warrior retorted angrily. "Haven't I been waiting here myself for half the morning because I thought we were to go on the hunt today? And hasn't he spent every moment of these past days with that woman? Find her if you want to find Finn." Cowlight was right. As he spoke, Finn and Sob, flanked as usual by the wary hounds, were climbing nearby and picking the wild flowers as they went. He carried a harp, and when they reached the top, she sat laying out flowers and gathering them in bright bundles, while he stood nearby and played a lilting tune that matched the flowers. Bright colors in its notes. The dogs sat down and seemed to smile in appreciation as they listened, while Sob's body swayed easily with the tune. When he had finished, she clapped in delight. "You play very well," she said. "I didn't know you could do that, too. Another talent you've kept hidden." "Canoe de Royal taught me," he said. I've not played in some time. He smiled and moved over to sit down close beside her. But then, there are many things I have not done in some time. Thank you. Please, she said in embarrassment. I don't want to feel I've taken you away from other things, from what you know and love. But you haven't, he said earnestly, taking her hands. You've given me more. You've given me back what I'd lost. These past days, I've realized that what you said was true. There was a regret in me. I'd told myself that I was rushing about, keeping busy because I was meant to do. That it was all a Fionn warrior needed to make his life happy. Now I see that I was only trying to fill up my days, to keep myself from thinking, from facing the loneliness, the desire for something else. Why, she asked, her eyes searching his with compassion. What would you make you that way? No, what would you make? What would make you that way? Okay, let's slow down. Breathe and have a drink, baby. Come on. All right. What would make you that way? There was another woman, he said frankly. She told me that there was no room in our lives for anything but our duty to our destinies. Mine was to be captain of the Fionns, as my father's was. That has led me, driven me, directed me all of my life. I thought that she was right, but she wasn't, Sob. I was as trapped by that life as you were trapped within the fawn's shape, doomed to live as others felt I should. Cursed to never be free. This other woman, she said in a careful, almost reluctant way, did you love her? In a way, very much, he said, but not in the way that I do you. Oh, he just dropped it. Me? She said in surprise. Yes, you, he said, exuberantly, bringing her hands to his lips and kissing them. He spat out a mouthful of blossoms from the flowers she still held before, going on with undiminished passion. You freed me, Sob. As I freed you, you can continue to have that freedom together. But I want to know that it will go on always the same. I don't know what to say, she said, completely flustered. Just say that you feel as I do, Sob. Say that you accept my love and return it. Without you, I'd have nothing, she said. Now you have become my life. What else can I say, Finn? Of course, I love you. Woo! Feel the fire. He pulled her toward him, and her lips met his, her body pliant, willing, her arms encircling him. The dogs, clearly embarrassed by his emotional display, politely looked away. Cowlight stood in the yard just inside the main gates, tapping his foot in an impatient way as Finn, Sob, and the two dogs entered the fortress. The young man and woman lapping together. It was late afternoon, the lowering sun already growing red within a band of horizon lining clouds. Well, Cowlight said in a pettish way, you've taken your sweet time in getting home. They looked up at him, but his grim expression had little effect on their buoyant mood. Cowlight, Finn greeted cheeringly, slapping his comrade on the shoulder. It's the one person I'm most glad to see. Is it? The other replied testily. And do you even know how late it is? Finn glanced around at the sun, as if realizing the lateness of the day for the time. Well, it is late, isn't it? He said, grinning. We lost track of time. We were picking wild flowers. Hold on. We were picking wild flowers. Cowlight lifted a hand and plucked a stray violet blossom from Sob's unbound and flowing hair. So I see, he said without amusement, handing it to her. She took it, looking down, her lashes hiding her eyes, a flush of embarrassment coloring her white cheeks. Finn only laughed boyishly and threw an arm about her. It's a fine sport, Cowlight, he said. Better than hunting boar. You should try it. I need to talk with you, Finn, Cowlight said. The voice was chill, the expression hard. Sob looked at him with some concern, and then at Finn. I'll just go inside and prepare for the evening, she said. If you must leave, said Finn, giving her a warm parting hug. She went off toward the hall, carrying the bouquet, his eyes following the lightly swaying figure of her. Then he turned, still smiling, to his friend. Now, Cowlight, he said with excitement, I've something to tell you. First, Finn McCoomhale, you listen to me. The other replied heatedly. No one else has been able to talk to you for days, except for your little fun. What do you mean? Said Finn, his smile changing to a puzzled frown. What's wrong with you? I've had as much of your behavior as I can endure. So have the others in this fortress. You've ignored us, and what's worse, you've neglected your duties. All to play nursemaid to the girl. That girl needs me, he retorted. So do the Fianna. There's no war. There've been no troubles for a year. What do they need me for, desperately as that? There are other things. You're my right hand. You take care of them. And haven't I been? It was I who took out the hunt today, or we'd have had no food tonight. I settled the disputes and bartered with the lords for you, and I'm sure you did it as well as I would have done, Finn told him. Now, let me be about washing for dinner, he started away toward the basin. Cowlight, aghast at his cavalier response, let him get away a step before going after him, grabbing an arm and swinging him round. What are you saying? He cried. Those things aren't for me to do. His angry gesture and his rising voice had called the attention of those about in the yard to them. Now many ceased their activities to eavesdrop openly on this unusual confrontation of the two friends. They are now, Finn said blithely, announced. Am I not the captains of the Fians? Why shouldn't I have things as I wish? And for once, I wish to have some time for myself. For the girl, you mean? Cowlight argued. She's bewitched you. She's using you. She needs you to go outside these walls. She's brought you to deny your duty for her. Ooh. At this, Finn finally grew angry. You've gone too far now, Cowlight. Old friend or not, it's not true. What you say. Sob loves me, and I love her. Love? Said Cowlight. No. Finn. You don't mean that. I do. And you're forcing me now to tell you in anger what I mean to tell you in great joy. Thinking you'd join in my celebration. I mean to wed Sob as soon as the arrangements can be made. I will build a new house for her here, with a great sunroom high upon it where she can go and see the countryside. And the two of us will dwell there as husband and wife from that time on. With these words, he wheeled and stalked off across the yard, leaving Cowlight to stare after him in dismay, and the others in the yard to exchange wondering looks. Chapter 7, Vows. The material fanned out as the gown fell open, displaying its richness, the wealth of deep blue silk. In its many gatherings shimmered in the sunlight. The elaborate, exquisitely stitched embroidery of golden thread that bordered neckline, sleeves, and hem was radiant, like strands of flame against the cool, billowing waves of the material. Sob gave a soft exclamation. Hold on. Sob gave a soft exclamation of delight and ran a hand slowly centrally over the garment before looking up at the beaming, round-faced woman who displayed it for her. "It's a most wonderful gown," the girl said in a voice touched with awe. She had to all but shout this, however, to be heard over the sound of banging and thumping that seemed to fill the room, echoing as if they were within a drum. "I've never seen its like for the grandness. It's only what's deserving for the woman you'll be marrying. Hold on. It's only what's deserving for the woman who'll be marrying our fine captain," brusquely observed a black-haired older woman standing beside the first. "Finn must see it," Sob told them excitedly. They were within Finn's chambers of the great hall, and she crossed to the large outer window, whose shutters were thrown fully open, letting in the daylight and giving a view of the yard. It was from there all the noise was coming, for not far from the hall a new structure was being erected. It was much the same in the construction, but smaller in the girth, and with a full second story that had a granion, a broad sunroom with a balcony upon its western side. The plank framework of its outer wall was fully up, the long posts of its roof supports set within. Now some workers were busy at weaving and attaching the wattle panels. That's Wattle, that would form the building's skin. Others were daubing with thick, mucky plaster the sections already in place, while yet more inclined precariously about to atop the structure to set the roof beams and the ribs of the supporting joist needed for the thatching. Altogether, several scores of men were hard at these various tasks, and the combined sounds of their hammering raised quite a din. Sob leaned out the window and looked about the construction site. She soon picked Finn out of the confusion, standing near the new building, deep in conversation with the short, broad-set man while gesturing emphatically at parts of the construction. "Finn!" she called out, waving energetically. "Finn!" Hearing his name, he turned to see her at the window. "Come here, please, if you can," she cried, gesturing him to her. "I have to show you this." The words did not carry to him through the noise, but the gesture was enough. He smiled and waved in quick acquiescence, then spoke briefly to the beefy man. "Just keep them at it, Cronin. I want this all completed before the wedding day, and everything must be right." "Aye, Captain." The man assured him with a grin. "It will be." Across the yard, far removed from the work, Cowlight and some other warriors idled, watching the construction. Like most people, these men largely seemed to be entertained by the intriguing spectacle of a building going up. all but Cowlight. He stood moping, his gaze sullen, and when he saw Finn leave the sight and go bounding across to sob at her call, he remarked bitterly upon it to the young warrior called Luke Hade. "See that now, will you?" The boy sails to her as if he were her banded falcon coming at her whistle. "He's in love, Cowlight." The other said in smiling defense, "And who of us hasn't acted so, and the same illness was upon us? Be easy with him, it'll pass." "Will it?" the dark warrior said doubtfully. Meantime, Finn was leaning in through the window, while Sob had the women hold up the gown for him to see. "Isn't it wonderful?" she gushed. "The sewing women of Mog Femin have made it for me. It is truly fine work." Finn agreed. He looked to the two women. "I thank you for it, sisters." The round-faced woman giggled at the compliment, but the stern one shot an elbow to her ribs and sobered her, and the two made a low curtsy together, chorusing, "We thank you, Captain." "I can't wait until I see you in it," Finn told Sob. "But we haven't long now. The guests are beginning to arrive." Hold on. "The guests are beginning to arrive." "I know," she said. "I'm feeling the anticipation of tingling within me. The other ladies are coming to help with the gown fitting this very afternoon." "Ah, I come. Okay, and I could come and help as well," Finn asked playfully. "Oh, Finn," she replied coyly, dropping her gaze and blushing prettily. Yeah, prettily, okay. I'm dainty. Sorry. "Sorry," he said, but not contritely, adding in a still teasing way, I'll have all our lives for seeing you, won't I?" The round-faced woman tittered again, and Sob's blush began all the more glowing. "Enough of that now," the dour woman said severely, taking charge. She moved toward the window, shooing him back. "Be away with you, Finn MacCoomhall. It's a shame you should be saying such things to this lamb." He stepped back as the woman grabbed the shutters. "You're not needed here anymore," she told him. "So goodbye." And with that, she slammed the shutters and closed it on his face. Grinning broadly, Finn turned and started back toward the construction site. But he paused as he noted a group of warriors riding in through the fortress gates. They were a somberly dressed and stolid-looking lot, all in similar green and black patterned cloaks denoting their clan. As they came into the yard, Finn strode up to them, raising a hand in greeting. They reined in before him, raising hands in response. Rearrange my sit. Next page, baby. And refill coffee. That's right. Got my Swedish coffee rocking. Oh, yeah. Okay. Fill up the beverage. Hail the beverage. Thank you. Back to the captain. At their head were two men, whose similarity in looks marked them as brothers. One was a large, square-shouldered man of rugged looks, one eye covered by a leather patch. The warrior beside him was much softer in shape, with a great belly, full and flamboyantly mustached face, and balding head. "Goal," Finn addressed the one-eyed man heartily. "I'm glad that you come." He looked to the stout warrior, adding, "You as well, Conan." Conan's reply was an unintelligible grumble. "I'm certain my brother said he's pleased to come," Gull said with dry sarcasm. "He knows how much food and drink you'll be having. That he will, Finn said, laughing. Dismount now, and I'll have the groom see your horses. You and Clan Namorna are welcome to Almhuin. The men climbed down, and several of the leather... Let's see. Several of the grooms rushed from the stables to take the horses' reins. As the mounts were led away, Finn escorted the men toward the main hall. I've quarters ready for you, he told Gold. Rough Buzzing will see that you have refreshments and a place to rest. Tonight we'll feast and talk about old times. You must meet Sob. At this, Conan gave a grunt of laughter and said gruffly, Can't you imagine a woman getting you to marry her? Wouldn't have a bit of games with you otherwise, eh? I see that you've lost none of your coarseness with age, Conan, Finn answered affably. Nor any of your weight. They reached the hall's main doors, and Finn stepped aside to usher the clansmen inside. But as Goal started in, he paused, pulling back to let a woman emerge. Mother, hello, Finn said with pleasure. She seemed more a girl than a woman, old enough to be mother to Finn MacCoomhall. Her looks were beautiful. She was small and fair, her hair silver blonde like Finn's own. Lady Muirn, Goal said, bowing graciously. A great pleasure it is to see you once again. And you, chieftain, she responded, with light, courteous smiling at him. We've not met since your clan came to fight at the White Strand. I hope you are well. As well as any man can expect, he said in practical way. And Conan, she went on, you still seem as healthy as ever you were. That fact your son has already pointed out. He growled and went on into the hall. Excuse my brother, Goal told Muirn. He's hungry from the trip. My own good health to you and to your husband, Mog Nuadat. He bowed again, and entered the hall. The rest of his clansmen following, Finn lingered behind to speak to his mother. Have you been settled? He asked. Yes, my dear, she assured him. Everything is fine, and I've been to see your Sob. I'm to help her with her gown this afternoon. What did you think of her, mother? He asked with an air of pride. She's a beautiful woman, isn't she? She's lovely, Muirn said, but with a note of care in her voice. Very intelligent, quite sweet. But she hesitated, and Finn clearly expected an unqualified endorsement of his choice from her. Frowned in puzzlement. But what, mother? What's wrong? Well, she went on with a certain reluctance. I've spoken to the other women here. I've learned the story of this poor girl. I wish that I could help you to find this terrible fear, Dorsh, and remove the curse of him from her forever, but I can't. I've been too long separated from the She to get any help from them, and even if I could, I might not help. When he left so many centuries ago, it was said that his magic was so strong that not even the greatest druids of the She could find his hiding place. It is all right, mother, he assured her. I've resigned myself to the fact that I might never find the dark druid, as has Sol. We are content that she stay here with me. Still, it is a hard thing, she went on. Still, with the odd tone of concern. I feel very sorry for this girl, and I hope that sorrow is not all you feel. I don't understand, he said. She hesitated again. again. Then faced him squarely, steely herself, and speaking in a frank parental way. My Finn, you know, I'd not ask this if I weren't your own mother. Your own mother. Concerned for your welfare, you're not marrying her out of pity, are you? Out of some feeling that she needs your help, your comfort, the freedom only you can give her. Of course not, he protested, looking shocked. Mother, you know me. It's much of your own spirit that's in me. You can sense my true feelings, can't you? I do love her. She's become more my life than I have hers. And she's given me much more than I have given her. Things you've wished for me, yourself, freedom, from what my destiny has done to me. Can't you feel that? She looked deep into his eyes, and then she smiled with pleasure and relief. I can, my son. I hope your marriage will be a happy one. The blessing of Danu be upon you. She took his hand in her own and clasped it tightly. The hands were clasped above the basin of the beaten silver. They were tied loosely by a string of mistletoe twined about them and up the arms of man and woman, literally binding them. Another pair of hands moved in and began to unwind the vine. Finn and Sob, she in the blue gown, and he in the white tunic and crimson cloak, stood patiently upon the dais, looking at one another with beaming smiles as the gray-haired druid named Kenneth, clad in gleaming white robes, proceeded with the slow untwining of the prickling leaves. A second druid stood beside him, holding the silver chalice below the couple's hands by its gracefully curved swan-shaped handles. Around them, in the hall, a hushed company crowded the vast floor, watching the sacred ritual with great solemnity. The mistletoe was unwound and handed to another young druid hovering behind the chief one. Then Kennel Skaith took from a third acolyte a crystal carafe. With the ivy you are bound, he said, and slowly poured the water over the clasped hands. With the water of life you are washed, cleansed, and made pure in each other. The water sparkled over their hands, running down to be caught in the bowl. When the carafe was empty, the druid handed it back to his attendant and placed one of his hands upon those of the pair. The wedding is ended, he announced in a resounding voice. Before these witnesses, who all give surety to see its vows are kept, Finn and Sob are from this day man and wife. The solemn crowd instantly went mad with elation. Men hooted, bellowed, shouted out their joy. There was one general rush forward to give them best wishes, and another toward the tables loaded with food and immense tankards of ale. Through the laughter, congratulations, and general confusion of celebration, Finn and Sob made their way to the door. Here Finn gave a great hug to his mother, passed final goodbyes to his guests, and led his bride from the hall. Some of Finn's friends, clansmen, and chieftains followed them out, stopping just outside the door to watch the young couple cross the yard toward the new house. It was quite finished now, its upper sunroom catching the afternoon sun that glowed against the fresh white coat of lime. Waiting on either side of its doorway, sitting proudly on guard, were Braun and Skillan, the Irish hounds. The newlyweds paused upon the threshold where Finn threw a final grin and a jaunty wave to the watchers, while Sob smiled too, but in a more bashful way. Then they were gone inside. I hope that the young girl will be all right, said his mother. She seems so frail. With Finn to care for her, she'll be fine, Gola McMorna assured her. I wish a good marriage to them, and now, lady, would you give me the honor of joining the wedding feast in my company? It would be my own pleasure, she responded graciously. It would be my own pleasure, she responded graciously. She took his proffered arm, and they returned inside with the others. The festivities were already well underway, with a great deal of eating, but a great deal more of drinking. As people milled round and musicians played, some danced in the open space about the fire, capering to the jigs of great liveliness, helped along by the ale that made them seem to glow. Conan was already well on his way to demolishing the contents of an entire table of food. New de Royal circulated, joking, greeting, and playing here and there when coaxed. He traveled about nearly all the room when he paused, catching a glimpse of something through the shifting crowd. Curious, he tried jumping up to see more clearly through the forms that towered over him. Frustrated, he clambered onto a table to peer over the heads. From this vantage point, he was finally able to see clearly across the gathering to the outer edge of the hall. There, at a table as removed as possible from the milling throng, sat Cowlight McRonan, alone save for a cup and a very large pitcher. He looked quite forlorn, and the little nut climbing down from his vantage point forced his way to him through the crowd. Well, it's a time for real merriment, the harper said, addressing him in boisterous tones. There was no response from Cowlight. He lifted his mug and took a deep draught, still starting ahead morosely. Nude Royal tried again. There'll be a fine time tonight. Feasting, drinking, dancing through till dawn. Yes, a fine time. Still no answer, not even a flicker of notice from the Dark Warrior. It would seem that you're not so happy as you might be, the harper said. At last this elicited a response, but far from amiable one. And why should I be? Cowlight barked, turning a hard gaze upon the little man. Why should you for all of that? He added challengingly. Can you watch him doing this and not feel something, man? What I feel is a happiness for Finn, New Royal told him. You should be feeling the same. I only want what's best for him. Cowlight gave a snort of derisive laughter. Best for him? Is it mad you are? How can this be the best for him? It'll be his ruin. His ruin! The little nut echoed in disbelief. And how is that? Can't you see it? The other nearly shouted in a heat of frustration fueled by the drink. His outburst caused others around to look toward them in alarm. Haven't you watched? She's made our proud wolfhound into a nursing puppy. She's taken his spirit. She's managed to do what all the creatures in the magic and the warriors and the kings of ire of the great world couldn't do. It's nonsense you're speaking, Nude Royal retorted. No one can challenge Finn now. Ireland is at peace, and the Fianna have the respect of the world. It's Finn's who's done all that. Now it's time for him. He's earned this for himself. Let him live his life a while, and in his own way. But his way is to give up everything, Cowlight bellowed, despairingly. Everything that makes him a warrior, everything that's worth being. Not to be hunting, fighting, and seeking some new adventure. His voice trailed off in overwhelming exasperation, and he drank again. I see it now, the little man proclaimed with a dawning understanding. It's jealous that you are. You think that you've lost him to her, lost your closest comrade. It's not it at all, you wretched dwarf, Cowlight scathingly protested. It's not just Finn and myself, it's something more, I can feel it. Why can't you? Are you certain? The harper replied, keeping his voice calm, patient, reasonable, as if only a slow hammering could drive his points into a brain made thick with ale. Think, Cowlight. You've protected him as a brother, as a father even. Since he was a untrained boy, you've been always at his side, fought back to back with him, saved him a score of times as he has you. Couldn't it just be that your sorrow comes from knowing things have changed? Cowlight eyed him searchingly, his dark eyes smoldering. Then he took another drink, draining the cup. But this last draught, instead of adding to his belligerence, seemed... Hold on. Smell the book. Seemed instead to drown it. The fire faded in him, and he sagged, sinking down defeatedly. Maybe you're right, my old friend, he said in a dispirited voice. He looked around the room at the rejoicing throng. Maybe things have changed. Maybe I'm not needed here anymore. Couldn't be time to move on to some place where a fighting man is still of some value. You've said that 100 times before, said Canute de Royal, smiling, but with worry showing in his eyes. This time I might just mean it, Cowlight darkly replied. Ooh. The firelight flickered along the edge of the mirror as Finn held it out. Hold on. Firelight flickered along the edge of the mirror as Finn held it out to Saul. She exclaimed in delight as she looked at it, turning it in her hands. It was a most exquisitely worked piece of bronze shaped in a circle with an open basketwork, handled of interlacing curlicue design. The mirror face was carefully polished to give a smooth, perfect reflection of the young woman's face. The back was intricately decorated in a scrollwork of most minute detail, curving pattern within pattern, an inset with gold, silver, and bright enameling. It's wonderful, she said. I have brushes and combs to go with it. I have brushes and combs to go with it, he said. The finest work of the best metal artists in Ireland. He gestured toward a glowing array laid out atop a table near the bed upon which they sat. The room, sumptuously appointed, plush with rugs and tapestries, already glowed with other textures, golds and bronzes and woods and rich metals. And I have more for you, he said eagerly. The glories of the world I have brought to you. The finest gowns, the richest cloaks and jewelry. That will make you shine like no queen has ever done. And she put up a hand, her fingers to his lips. Stopping him, she smiled. I thank you, she said. But you have already given me the greatest gift you ever could. She leaned toward him, her lips softly meeting his. Then they were embracing, falling back upon the bed in a passionate kiss. The mirror slipped from her fingers and to fall into the coverlets. Forgotten in this newer and more absorbing interest, After a moment, she pulled back, looking at him. There was a certain speculation in her eyes, touched with a concern. That smooth brow was marred by the crease of a frown. "What is it?" Finn managed after a deep breath. "Are you really concerned about this?" she asked him gravely. "I am," he replied without hesitation. His hand came up to cup her chin while he looked into those emerald eyes. "I've not wanted anything more or been so sure. You're the first time in my life I know I'm doing something only for myself. I love you, my wife. Then I give you freely what you desire, no less than I desire it myself," she said in a soft, throaty way. She sat up and in a single lithe move slipped off the simple shift that she now wore. Her smooth, fair body gleamed white gold in the firelight. She pulled the combs from her long hair and shook it free, letting it billow about her slim shoulders. Then she lay back again, close to him, smiling at him expectantly and a bit timidly. His sun-bronzed, here we go. His sun-bronzed hand moved out and stroked gently, slowly, caressingly, down her shoulder across the firm roundness of her breast. Oh, wow, we're getting saucy now. Over the smooth swell of her hip. She gave a small sigh of pleasure at the touch, raising her own hand to stroke the strong line of his jaw and trace the cleft of his firm chin. "I no longer feel afraid of anything," she said. "It's my strength you are now, my husband, as you are my freedom. I give you my full will, my full heart and being into your care. Then from here, we will be one," he said, pulling her toward him. "You'll have nothing ever to fear again." They embraced, their bodies pressing together. The light of the fire cast a warming glow upon them. A log fell, and the flames flared, crackling high. The flames leaped higher, crackling greedily as they ate through the thatch and snapped at the wood rafters of the hut. The rising plume of the firelight cast a ruddy glare upon the chaos below. There were rushing people and shrill cries of terror from the smoking interior of the hut. A woman ran, a wailing infant clutched protectively in her arms. She ran into a man in chainmail, vest, and peaked iron helmet, and tried to back away, screaming, her face twisted by fear. He grabbed her and held her easily and with one hand, his broad face split by a yellow-toothed grin. The broad-bladed sword he clutched in the other hand lifted and slashed down. Beyond the blazing hut were a number of other buildings, huddled together like frightened hares caught in a storm. Several of them were afire, too. Illuminating the whole village, the wide beach and the white surf, the Black Sea beyond. The light fell, too, on the sleek, serpentine forms of the carved figureheads glaring balefully from the bows of the dragon boats grounded on the shore. A great slaughter was just concluding, the blood and carnage of it spreading from the water's edge across the silver strand to the stricken village. More fearsome warriors in mail and elaborately spiked caps stalked like the ruthless predators they were amongst the ruins, seeking more prey. Others collected the heads of the victims, piling the trophies in a great cairns, whose draining blood formed rivers across the white sands to the sea. A broad-bearded man in a shirt of mail, his head covered by a helmet, sporting elk horns of gleaming bronze, strode through the stricken village to its inland side. There he joined several others and stood peering about him in a triumphant way. "They're all dead," one of the warriors said scornfully. They put up a poor enough fight. They put up a poor enough fight. Another warrior held up a golden locket, intricately worked and set with jewels, but badly dented and splattered with wet blood. Look, my chieftain, he said, eyes bright with greed. They have much wealth. The broad man snatched it away, chuckling in satisfaction. He held it aloft in the ruddy firelight, the blood looking black against the glowing brightness of the gold. Easy riches, he said, examining the prize. If the rest of the Irish have no more stomach for the fight than these, take this whole coast. Then we'll take this whole coast. Tossed the trinket back and strode away, followed by his men. But once they were gone, a figure rose in the shadows of a thicket, not far from where they had stood. He was a grotesque sight, his face cut from temple to chin, his clothing torn and streaked with gore. He looked pale and weak, his body shivered violently. Still, he was able to stagger away, leaving the horrid, flame-lit scene behind, disappearing into the cloaking night. The face loomed out of the darkness of the yard. Chapter 8, A Parting. The face loomed out of the darkness of the yard into the light spilling from the wide doorway. Two warriors supported the drooping figure, helping it to move stumblingly forward across the threshold into the hall of Amhuin. They were in a bright array in a jocular fellowship, in cheering warmth and glowing firelight. The company of Finn's household were met in their evening's feast. At first, none of them noted the arrival of the grim and ominous intruder. The gaiety was at its height, the chief bard regaling Finn, sob in the gathering with a most colorful tale. So the Dogda took up the ladle. So the Dogda took up the ladle, he was saying, and it big enough that a man and a woman could lie down within the bowl. You scooped up the broth with it, taking out bits as large as half a pig each time, and putting the full ladle in his mouth until the great hole was empty. And he left scraping through the earth and gravel for more. The audience roared in laughter at this image of the famous she-champion. The bard waited for it to subside just enough to continue, keeping the roll of the crowd expertly to build another swell. When he was finished, sleep came on him. The Famor laughed at him lying there with his belly swollen like a great cauldron. So he rose up angrily, bloated as he was, and started home, dragging a wheeled fork it would take 8 men to carry, and it making a track after him, deep enough to be the boundary ditch for a whole province. This brought more laughter, and it was interrupted by a loud cry of alarm from Sob. Her joy had in that instant vanished from her. She stood up, lifting a hand to point across the room, horror in her eyes as if it were her curse come upon her once again. By all the gods, she cried out. Finn, look. Heads turned. There were more sounds of consternation spreading rapidly through the crowd like ripples from a stone dropped in a pond. Eyes followed the gazes of others, focusing all attention toward one spot. Finn, along with many others, now rose too, his body tensing, his cheerful expression turning abruptly grim as his own gaze fell upon the man. He was indeed a doleful sight in the ragged clothes, all streaked with the rust of dried blood and the long gash from forehead to throat, vivid against the dead white of his pale skin. So thin and worn was he that he seemed a wraith, an apparition of the dead of some forgotten war, fluttering in on the night winds as a dark omen. But he was no wraith, and he had not yet lost the last of his strength. He now pulled himself away from the supporting men, straightening himself, and with an obvious effort that seemed a proud display of fortitude, took a few more faltering steps into the center of the room. "My captain," he gasped out. "My captain, we were attacked. It was the Lochloners." There was a collective gasp of shock from the crowd. Many of the warriors leaped to their feet. The man's effort had drained the strength he had mustered, and he swayed. He would have collapsed had not the guards moved up to support him once again. While his words had naturally raised a storm of emotion in the hall, Finn continued just to stare at the man. His face stony, Cowlight looked toward him expectantly, as did many others, clearly awaiting his response. But when nothing came, when Finn continued to stand as if frozen there, Cowlight's expression turned to one of puzzlement. To cover Finn's unaccountable lapse, he himself then stood moving round the table to address the refugee. "Where was this attack?" he demanded. "How long ago? How large? Give us more details, man." It was on the coast." The others forced out between labored, weary pants. "The ships are in the bay below Bain Eder. The warriors have landed there, many hundreds of them. They mean to raid inland." "They'll do great damage. They're not stopped," said Cowlight grimly. They destroyed my village, slaughtered my clansmen," the man said, voice choking with rising sorrow. "My own wife, my child." Overcome with emotion, he sagged between the men, head hanging, and began to weep. Cowlight turned toward Finn again, obviously awaiting some response. Still there was none. His gaze met a shuddered stare. Finn was like a man struck blind and deaf by some nearby lightning stroke. "Well, Captain," Cowlight finally demanded, his voice taking on a prodding note as if he were trying to awaken his comrade. "What are we going to do?" And then more impatiently, "Finn, what will we do?" This last seemed to reach Finn. He wrenched his gaze from the man to Cowlight, then swept it over the others in the room, who were all staring at him now. Their puzzled looks indicated that they too were sensing something wrong. So did the frown of Sob as she lifted her eyes toward her husband's face. There was a long silence as he looked about him, his expression one of discomfort and uncertainty. His eyes swept the crowd, returned to Cowlight, then dropped to meet those of his wife. Okay, I repeated that. He stared at her a moment, fixedly, then looked about the room again. "I must consider this," he said hesitantly, vaguely. There was a muttering of astonishment at that. But Cowlight's response was more explosive. "Consider!" he cried. "What is there to consider, Finn? The man's village has been destroyed. Irishmen have died. Our country has been invaded. What else is there to do but fight?" To this fiercely stated proclamation, there were loud, eager cries of support. I said, "I must consider." Or, "I said I must consider," Finn said in a voice now angry and so keen of edge that it cut across the voices, silencing them all. "See to the man," he ordered curtly. "We will retire now." He held out a hand to his wife. She looked round her at the stunned gathering, then up to him again, somewhat fearfully. But finally, obediently, she took his hand. She led hers down from the dais and across the silent room at a brisk stride, not pausing, sweeping out the doors, leaving those behind staring after him in disbelief. Then Cowlight, momentarily nonplussed, like the others, came to life. "Well, I'll not accept that," he bellowed and started after them. He stalked out of the hall, gathering, exploding into excited talk behind him. He charged across the yard toward Finn's new private residence, reaching its door only moments after the couple had passed inside. As Cowlight stormed across the threshold, Finn swung round. His expression first surprised the darkening with darkening indignation. "What do you mean following us here? Bowling into my quarters uninvited?" Cowlight was taken aback by this scathing rebuke. "What are you saying, Finn?" he said, aghast. "Can you be hearing yourself? I'm your best friend, come to talk. Before there were no private places. Has she taken even that?" The girl colored and moved away from them. Crossing the room, Finn grew more angry, striding up to Cowlight, facing him challengingly. "No more of that," he warned. "She has taken nothing from me. I'm not a part of you, Macronin." Cowlight was clearly stung more greatly by this. Pain swept across his face, then a determination hardened in it again. "But you are still my captain of the Fianna," he retorted. "You are still bound by your oath." Deep now. Finn turned on his heel and stalked away to stand by Sob, one hand upon her shoulder. His face turned from the Dark Warrior. "Finn, you can't ignore what's happened," Cowlight said, his tone almost pleading. "There must be an answer, and it must be given now." "I'm not ignoring it," Finn responded coldly. "I said I would consider. There may be ways to deal with this without a hosting." "Deal with it?" Cowlight repeated in disbelief. "Is it madness you're speaking? This is an invasion, and within our own province. It is for our fians to meet it, and it's for you to lead them as you always have." "Things are different," Finn said tersely. I've other considerations now." "You mean her, don't you?" the Dark Warrior cried, pointing to her in an accusing way. "Is that what's happened? Has she so enchanted you that you can't pry yourself from her side, even for now?" "She must be protected," Finn said stubbornly. "The fortress protects her. It's Ireland you should be thinking of." "Ireland? Ireland," Finn chanted angrily, turning back toward Cowlight again. "Why is it always her? I give to her and I have nothing for myself. Why?" "Because it was what you were meant to do," Cowlight told him. "Because it's what you're given your oath to do." "Is it?" Finn shot back. "Not by my own choice." "You can't really mean this," his friend argued. "You've given up hunting and all your other duties to the fians for her, but you cannot give up this. It's your honor you're meaning to destroy. You told me once that honor only kills men foolish enough to follow it," Finn reminded him. "And maybe I did," Cowlight admitted. "But go, McMorna. said once that a man lives after his life, but not after his honor. Remember that as well. This seemed to have some impact upon Finn. His look grew less adamant, and Sob, listening to Cowlight's speech, seeing the expression on her husband's face, now put a hand upon his arm and spoke imploringly. Don't do this, my love. He is right. You can't betray your sworn out of fear for me. I would never rest with the thought of it. That poor man, she said in pity, his family was killed just as my own. You can't let that remain unanswered. You have to go. But what about you, he asked, looking down at her. As Cowlight said, the fortress protects me. So long as I stay within its walls, you can leave me safely. He put his hand upon hers. All right, he agreed, reluctantly. If it's what you wish, he looked to Cowlight. Go and tell our warriors, send Fergus True Lips to call our clans, and fetch the Dord Fion. We will host. Cowlight smiled with relief. I will, Captain, he answered elatedly, and then rushed out. Finn turned and took his wife's arm, his eyes searching hers. My dearest Sob, it is certain you are of this. I am, she assured him. Though I will fear for you, and I will miss the warmth of you beside me, it is right that you should go. Were you not the great captain that you are, you'd not have saved me, and I'd not have so great a love for you. She left him crossing to a wall hung with weapons. From its hooks she lifted down the glowing gray iron sword called the Macan Luin, the son of the waves. It was a heavy weapon for the frail girl, and it was with some effort that she carried it back, holding it out, hilt first, to Finn. I'll put your sword into your hands myself, she said. Use it to answer the wrongs done that man and other helpless people... Done that man and all other helpless people of Ireland. He looked at the proffered weapon, then at her. Finally, slowly, his hand came up and gripped it. I hoped that I might never have use for this again, he said wistfully, and held it up. Light gleamed along its smooth, slender, lethal blade. The sword slipped into the silver-banded sheath. Finn MacCoomhale then took up the great oval of metal called the Storm Shield, and slipped his left arm into its grips, settling it firmly. He nodded with satisfaction and turned to examine the company of his fighting men. It was a more grim and busy and business-like company of warriors who now filled the yard. The romantic firelight and the surroundings of the grand hall were gone. The sharp, hard light of the chill dawn etched them clearly, starkly, as the simple, hardened men preparing for the one occupation that was their real life and their real love, fighting other men. Their rich ornaments had been put aside, their fine clothes changed for the warrior's simple tunic and the dark blue cloaks of the Basine clan. The only things about them that glittered now were the keenly honed points of their spears and the cutting edges of their blades. The air had no music, no laughing, no sweet sounds of birds to it, but only the talk of battle and the harsh clattering of arms. Finn ran a scrutinizing eye over the assembly. They seemed nearly ready to move. He turned to where Cowlight stood, a score of other clan chieftains, each in the cloak of his own identifying colors, grouped behind him. Our clan is ready, Finn said to Cowlight, and then looked to the chieftains. All our fighting men are prepared as well, Captain, one said. With the other clans that mean to join us on the way. We will reach the coast with the full battalion strength of the Mithfians. Very well, Finn said briskly. Go to your clans, chieftains. We'll leave at once. As the chiefs departed, the Cowlight passed the word to the Basine men to be ready to march. Finn strode to the hall. There the families of the warriors were gathered, making their goodbyes. Sob stood there too, with Canute Royal at her side and the two hounds flanking them. Remember now, Finn admonished the little man. All but the servants of the families of the clan and a handful of our older men will be gone. I give the charge of my wife's safety to you, my oldest friend. He clapped a hand to the shoulder of the little nut. Keep her within the fortress walls until our return. You're better than any of us here should be able to guard against any of the Druid's trickery. And don't I know that better than my own name? The harper said with a smile. It must be 100 times now. You've said these things to me. He gripped Finn's arm and said gravely, reassuredly, I will take care of her. Have no fear of that. Finn nodded, gave the man's shoulder a final affectionate pat, and turned to Saul. You listen to him now and keep safe, told her, smiling but with a serious tone behind it. You sound like my father used to, she said, laughing. She leaned forward and gave him a final kiss upon his cheek. Go on now, my captain. Your men are waiting, and you, she told the dogs, you go as well. Stay with him and protect him for me. I'll come back to you as soon as I can, Finn said. Earnestly, I promise you. He said earnestly, I promise you. He and the hounds joined the warriors, and they moved in a body out through the gates. Sob, Nude Royal, and the families of the warriors moved out after them. Outside the fortress, the warriors of a dozen other clans made the hillside of Almhuin, a bright patchwork with their masked cloaks. They fell in behind Basine men as Finn led them down the slope at a brisk pace. The family stopped just outside the gateway solemnly, watching the men move away. Canute Royal glanced up at the girl and noted that her own look of cheerfulness, put on so bravely for Finn, had now been replaced by a worried frown. What's wrong, girl? He asked. You're not worrying about his going off, are you? After the brave show. I dreamed of him in battle, she said. He looked worn and badly hurt and in great pain. Ah, you have no fear of that, the little man assured her heartily. No man born mortal or she can defeat that one. The warriors were heading away from the dun, now at the ground-eating pace. Their individual forms joined by distance into a single moving thing, glints from the sun on their spears, points like silver threads in a tapestry. I've just a feeling, she said vaguely, as if trying to grasp it. A feeling that I'll not see you again. Nonsense, Canute Royal scoffed. Come in now, and I'll play you a tune that'll be sure to give cheer to you. Come on along. Most of the others had already returned inside and into the fortress. He led her across the bridge while he cast many a backward glance after Finn. Once within the gates, he gestured to a pair of gray-headed warriors. They pulled the heavy portals slowly closed, and Sob watched with uncertainty as they came together with a final sounding boom. When the gates closed, shutting off the view of the yard, the glowing bubbles seemed to lift and turn in a sweeping move as the seer provided Fyodorsh with a panorama of the countryside and a clear view of the army moving away. You see, Malakrod said triumphantly, pointing, they have left the fortress. The bubble abruptly soared forward and down in a stomach-lifting drop that ended just before the moving force. And there is Finn himself leading them. Fear Dorsch leaned forward, staring intently at the image of the fair-haired warrior striding toward him at full life size. You are right, he said. I told you that they were gathering to act somehow, she said. When I saw them starting out this morning, I called for you. They are off on a campaign. Finn has finally left your precious fawn alone. Alone? He repeated thoughtfully. Of course. The dune itself still protects her. It does, she agreed. And I'm certain this so clever Finn would not leave her without guardians. To enter without your own powers to help you would still be too dangerous. Yes, he said. I suppose it would. But then his thin mouth lifted in a smile of cunning. First, I must be certain that Finn will be safely out of the way for the time. That must be for you to discover for me. Keep watch upon this army and tell me how far they go. Then I will visit this Almhuin once again. Gave a low chuckle of pleasure and stepped toward the image, standing face to face with it. Then, my proud Finnmakumhail, he said, gloating, I will have what is mine and take my revenge on you. In the same brilliant act, he lifted his staff, poking the silver tip toward the unaware young warrior's face. For it's back, for it's yourself who will give me the means to take Saul back from you. Okay, that's the end. Next chapter is chapter 9, Deception. All right, and that's where I'm stopping. Page 93, baby. Awesome. It takes a lot of concentration for me to read. Pronunciation. Easy on the way, you wanna find love, say. Easy on the way, you wanna find, you wanna find. Easy on the way, you wanna find love, wanna find love. Easy on the way, you know. Wanna find love, stay. Dry as I am, like a toad on a log, sitting on the pond, watching the ripples float by. Easy on the way, you know. can see you on the breeze. Oh, you dance the fire and circle around the sea. Everybody knows. Everybody knows there'll be a hand in the back room, said. Everybody knows. Everybody knows, said. Everybody knows that the sky's falling down, Everybody knows, say it. Heard you calling in the air. Folk free said. Wise woman circle all around me. Circle all around me. Oh. If that day does come, battle on the horizon, on the horizon, battle on the horizon, oh, easy on the wave, you know. I do it for the free folk, do it for the memories. It's the only way I know to heal my heart and soul. Half glass made overflowing, not just full. Chalice on the way, sword overhead as it burning flame, shaking on the breeze, you know. Shield in hand, say, sword and shield. Yes, I will. On a summer day in the nighttime in a window's edge, stand, scared. Will you stand on the wave? Never know what's mulling around in the astral realm. What's that voice I heard on the wind, hey? I better know. By the heart's flame of my grandmother, grandfather. By the heart's flame, flame. watch that hand, it's a shadowy one. You got the 3-card money on the spread. There ain't no winners in a fixed game, you know what I mean? Like a puppeteer pulling the strings, hey. 3 cups and a pea. That's what I said, but there ain't no peas, just an illusion. Freedom on the way, freedom on the way. Hey. Oh, 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 oh. Battle over here. See the ravens overhead. Morrigan circling overhead. She knows the battle's on the way. Which warrior shall she claim for the sovereignty of the land? Danu, Mother Goddess, Grandmother, oh. Bridget on the way, Morrigan. Sisters times 3, that's what they said. At least in the stories, that's what they say. What makes sense, we gotta have 2 sides of the coin down. Harmony, I lied, you do. Not one greater than the other. Harmony, 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 harmony. Oh. Well, when they drove the snakes out, I don't think I trust that at all. Well, some say there was a potato famine in Ireland, but I know they were pushed off the land, sent off to other lands for other men. indentured slavery, workhouses and a prison house to be. Freedom, freedom. I lied. Stevens is my name. Madman, I lied. I have a clear head, you know. I know I'm small. Easy on the way. Remember, circle around, stay. Waiting down by the shoreline. Easy on the way. I Captain Night. 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 Say, easy on the breeze as it goes. I-oh. Easy on the wave as I go. Easy on the wave. Everybody knows that it's coming down still. Battle coming now. Peaceful in the stronghold. Yeah. Surrounded in a shimmering light, the folk were guided by grandmother, grandfather said, shine on. Circle round, root down, fly high, spiral back down to the ground. Say I-oh. His grandmother, grandfather told me so. They told me so. Told me. Told me, oh, told me, say it. I love you so. Heart's flame, easy as it goes. Tree well and flame. I-oh. I love you so. Circle around as I go.